guaranteed 100% of the time, I can't even say 99%, 100% of the time, the superior, whoever it is, the boss, whoever I might be working with, if it's somebody that I've put in, loves it. They're like, oh my God, we
Mhm.
love you. And so your first week goes really well because you have now created a process that they did not have.
Well, something you said that I know people are really interested in because you have described your background similar to mine, being in healthcare. So whereas your background clinical, mine, or the technical person, mine was more on the administrative management side. Yet where I have decided to kind of stay, and it's just been easier flow for me to stay within the healthcare space, it sounds like you have gone into other industries with your project management. How did you do that? How did you accomplish jumping? Well, tell us what other industries you've worked in, and then how did you make those leaps and bounds in those other industries?
The short answer is I had to. When
Mhm.
I left the US to come to Canada, to move back to Canada, I I also moved to the southern part of Canada and I grew up in the northern part of Canada. So I really didn't know anybody in the area I was going to. I didn't especially know anybody in business and I had already started my business on there. So I had to pivot once again very quickly. And I did carry a contract with me working for academia. So after I left, just backtracking a little, when I was still living in California with my business, I ended up thinking that when I started my business, of course I could just manage healthcare projects, not realizing that I was a single mother at that point. And if I was going to continue to manage healthcare projects like I did as an employee, I was actually going to have to fly to sites a week at a time. And
Mm.
there's no way I could do that. I had two, preteens at home. There was just no way that I could. I was thinking, I didn't plan my own business as much as I should have at that point. And considering I've been creating backup plans for hospitals, I didn't have a backup plan for how this was going to work. So the first pivot I did was moving into academic projects and working with a large hospital, I'm sorry, a large academic institution in California. I was fortunate in that I was able to carry that project with me when I first moved back to Canada. But then things changed in the US. It was around 2016, and it ends up that I didn't have that contract anymore. This was late 2016. And so I looked around and I thought, well, there's lots of agriculture going on where I live now. So I started managing agriculture projects and agri-food and working with dairy supply management projects, all of this as a subcontract through somebody else who gave me a shot because they didn't, I had never managed those type of projects. And the one thing that I immediately realized, especially moving into agriculture, is that the exact same problems that were in the healthcare organization
Oh
getting
yeah.
out the door, I experienced in the academic institutions, and I was now experiencing in these agriculture spaces that everybody's having the same problems. We all have problems with communications, clean communications. We have problems collecting requirements and making sure we actually know what we're doing before we start it, or we at least have a sense of what we're doing, what we're jumping into. And I realized, wow, if I don't have to stay in healthcare. Now that is my sweet spot. That is the area that I myself am the subject matter expert in. However, when you go into manage projects that you're not a direct subject matter expert in, it actually gives you an entire different view at that project that many times people who have been in the weeds in that industry for 30 plus years don't see because we're
Mm.
coming in with a different perspective. There's a different perspective that we come in when we look at something from the outside. And sometimes it allows us, not sometimes, many times it allows us to ask questions that other people may not ask. Say, can I ask why you're doing it in this way? And it's kind of like, the story of the roast. Have you heard the story of the ends of the roast being cut off? Have you heard of this with the
No.
granddaughter? The granddaughter would watch her mother and her grandmother and her great grandmother. Every time she cooked a roast, they'd cut the ends off the roast and put it in the oven. And so finally she started asking, she went to the it was a small child, and she went to the great grandmother, or I'm sorry, she went to her mother first and said, Mom, why do you cut the ends off the roast before you cook it? And she said, because my mother did it. So then she went to the grandmother, Grandma, why do you cut the ends off the roast? She said, because my mother did it. And then she went to the great grandmother and said, why did you cut the ends off the roast? And she said, because it had to fit in the pan and I only had one pan. And so many people who have been in the same industry a long time, they only have one pan. And so they have a tendency to do things a certain way. And remember,
You're
back to the
so right.
evolution that we all need to do as people and project managers and companies, is that things do change. And so when you come in from that different perspective, now this isn't saying that you should not have someone who is an expert in healthcare or agriculture, or, managing your projects. However, if you have a project manager that can work with all of those people in a project management company who understands all of these different industries and the different things that you can do, there's a lot more that comes into play, and it really opens up different conversations. You might manage the projects in different ways. So some of the other industries I've done is digital marketing, insurance companies. I just finished a contract last year with a Canadian Football League sports organization. Who knew that I'd be managing projects for them? Software companies. It's kind of, you can kind of go all different directions. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for everyone. I don't recommend you just immediately start managing projects off, because there is something to be said about having a direct area of expertise in one area. It can
I
come back
agree.
later. Yeah. But do knowing, especially in the way the job market is right now, that you can cross into a different industry, even if it's just for a short period of time, and that's going to give you a whole different level of experience.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to prior to us recording when we talked about earlier, finding that sweet spot, doing it so well that the client will either say, "Hey, maybe they move on and they want you to come on board with the new industry or the new company that they're at because you did such a great job at what you did." I really do believe in, you know, being a master of something. I think we have to be careful about the jack of all trades, even though it may seem like it makes us versatile. It makes it really hard for people to think of you top of name, right? And it just gives you that comfort level that, absolutely, I can come in and, like you said, it's the same issues. Now, of course, when I go to a software, and software is not at all my sweet spot, but when I go in and just kind of dabble because they are insistent, no, we want you, Crystal. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll do an assessment. And it's like, it's the same issues. I'm like,
Isn't it?
it's the same issues, the lack of communications, the silo
Yeah.
mentality. I
Yeah.
just now need to spend more time understanding the nuances of their industry and the terminology. So I'm not like, well, what does this mean? So I had to do my due diligence and do my homework. And that's where, you know, as the project manager, I hear a lot, and this kind of is setting you up for an upcoming question. I hear a lot with new project managers. They're so disappointed in the fact that the company's not training them, especially when it is a project manager role. And so they're saying, yes, I can do it. I've been a project manager, but then they're expecting people to train them. And even for us as the experienced project managers, there's a level of onboarding that we need to go through, but we oftentimes find that we have to take the initiative and do the research, ask the questions, and not expect someone to come to us around that. What is your take on that? Do you feel like there's a level of responsibility of organization, especially when they're looking for project managers? They just want someone to come in and manage it. Is there a level of responsibility that organizations have to fully train a project manager on use of tools? Or do you just say, you can hope for it, but really anticipate that you're doing most of the self-training?
What a great question. So yes, there is a responsibility for the organization to provide that training. Do they do it? Do they have it? No. More often than not, no. But you're a project manager, so you can create it for yourself that will turn around and be used for everybody else who comes after you. And if I could count, I have lost count of how many times not only have I done this for myself in job roles that I'm in, or I have asked the people that I've put into companies to do this for themselves. Is as soon as we realize they have nothing in place, then I'm like, okay, pull up a blank document and start documenting what you're learning and all the different steps that need to have in place. And guaranteed 100% of the time, I can't even say 99%, 100% of the time, the superior, whoever it is, the boss, whoever I might be working with, if it's somebody that I've put in, loves it. They're like, oh my God,
Mhm.
we love you. And so your first week goes really well because you have now created a process that they did not have.
Yep. And that's
And
what they're
it's,
looking for when they bring us on. What I need a project manager. And so when you're asking them, oh, what's the onboarding? What tools do I need? Especially when you're the one lone person, they don't
yeah,
have it. They're looking for you to
yeah,
bring order to the chaos that they have.
right. And they may have it, but it may be old. It may be, I
Ancient.
found something that like was dated in the 80s or something that they handed over. I was surprised it was in a digital form. Like it was something super old. I'm like, okay, looks like it's been scanned in, but it's okay. We'll work with this, and it's there. Now, when I hear project managers complain about this, then I wonder, is this like, are you okay with this field? Because this is something we have to do all the time. If you think about when we start a
Yeah.
project, there's no roadmap in place. That's why we're there. That's what we have to create. So if we're going to create a project schedule, let's say for a project, why not also help create our own job role? And we have a tendency always, when you look at a job description, there's the small font on the bottom and other duties as required. Really, a
You
project
went
manager
there.
fits into every duty that, all other do, like that's where we always fit. And we don't always, very rarely do we come in for a very specific thing within a company. Sometimes we do, but usually when we do, we're also the subject matter expert. And so they've brought us in to fit a specific role, and then our job descriptions may match, or we may have a cleaner idea about when we come in there what we're doing, but generally not. So work
Yeah.
with it, pivot.
Work with it. Yeah, that's what makes you the awesome project manager that you are. And this is for everybody that's listening. Thank you so much for tuning in to this special series with our guest. If you enjoyed these episodes, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring even more great content to you. I'm Crystal Richards, and this is Real Life PMP Podcast. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and celebrate all of your wins.